little stuffy today, forgive me for that. But today we were going to talk about the catch pin. Now, this is a quick note on catch pin. And first I better kind of tell you where you're sitting. You're on the outside of the whole sheep pen, and one side of the floor of this whole sheep pen, we was made out of panels because we were going to expand. So I thought I'd do a quick note on that first. Is when you build a perimeter fence out of panels, you know, and it's going to stay there. It's going to kind of be a permanent fence. The way you do it is not how I did this right here. I only have one wire, one connection point that slides, and it allows this whole panel to slide. You know, it catches right there, but that allows this to bend. If a sheep runs up against it and hits it hard, you know, this thing will bend in ways you don't want it to. You want fences to act as a solid unit for the entire length of the fence, and this is not how you do it with panels. In the previous video, when I talk about sheep fencing, this is another note. It depends on the sheep, and once you get familiar with sheep, you know what you can get away with. So this only has two connection points, which I also don't recommend, right here and down there. If you ever want to make it out of panels, this is how you do it. You overlay, these are like 8-inch squares right here. You overlay them, one square on top of the other, and you'll wire, this will make it stout enough, but you'll wire tightly right around these cross sections, on top, in the middle, and at the bottom, and then you'll come over to this side and do the same thing, and then this whole thing will act stout. And if you can have a buddy pulling it tight as you wire it to the T-post, these things will be about as good as you can get, really. It's leaning on me, it's not connected over there. I ain't got no sheep grazing this tall grass, so it's growing over these panels. Okay, now let's talk about catch pin. You can see this tall panel right here. If you can get a tall panel, these things are normally pretty expensive if you buy them new. I got a great deal. I got like 18 panels, and they were all random sizes, and there's a couple of these huge ones, and this is 4x4 square. This cost me like 20 bucks or something, or like $10, which my dad says it, and I agree with him. When you can buy panels for below the market or whatever, buy them. Just put them on your place. Even if you don't have any reason to have them, put them there. They're easy to sell if you need to resell them. They got to be a deal. They got to be a deal to do that, but you'll never regret it. You know, if you ever get a hole in your fence, or you ever need to build a dog pen or something of the sort, there you go, you'll have them. So if you can get panels, get them. This one's so big, and I wired this part over here, that its only connection point, and this is the catch area, its only connection point is that T-post next to you. So it comes around here, and it's a little tight right now. I would widen it a little bit if I was catching them. And then onto the end of that one, no T-post again, I wired this panel onto it. And normally what happens is that if I haven't fed them in a few days or something, and there's not a ton of grass in here, I can feed in here, and then slowly walk out, and the sheep will look at you. You know, they're eating the feed, and then they look at you, seeing what you're doing. And you kind of have to be like a predator, but they can see your eyes. Like, the sheep are not stupid. They know what's going on. If you've ever caught them before, they're not stupid. And so they'll be looking at you. And when you move, when you make this sprint right here for this panel, interesting, some noise over there. When you make this sprint for this panel, they're going to start going crazy. They're all going to kind of go in a circle really quickly, and then they're going to make their break. So you got to grab this panel, and this is how this catch pin works. And this is a note, kind of like the fencing video, that your catch pin doesn't need to be fancy. You don't need to go, say you bought that panel brand new and this panel brand new, and say you're in it for $100 or something. Like, that's all it'll take to catch your sheep. You don't need to have pipe fencing. You don't need to have horse panels. You don't need anything like that. You don't need stout stuff. You just need the bare minimum that'll do. And if you're gonna do it this way, now you need to be able to be willing to manhandle your sheep, or you gotta have a place to back your trailer up so you can run them in there. And I have both. You know, I'm willing to manhandle them, and I have a place to back my trailer up next to this catch pin. But when they're in there, or you can run them all the way around. I've done this before. You run them all the way around, and then you run them down the fence line. And as you're running them, they all get in here, and they get to about this point. You know, the more times you have sheep, the more you'll notice the behavior. They get to about this point, and they'll realize, you know, over there it was wide enough, but once they get to this, it's almost like there's a fence right here, because they see where that collapsed down. They see how this is not a very big gap. And then they see, hey, there's nowhere to go over there. So then you'll have, I had 16 sheep in here. You'll have the front ones go, oh crap, and then they'll turn, and luckily you'll have the other 10 piling in behind them. So they can't, it'll be like, oh wait, they're all still coming, it must be okay. And then they'll turn again and then go, and then all 16 of them realize it's not okay, so then they turn. So when you're running them down the fence line, you have to know that's coming. You have to know that's coming, you're sprinting in, you grab this panel, you're pulling, and now they're kind of freaking out in circles. You'll have some sprint and hit that fence over there. You gotta be willing to take that blow. And when you close this panel, you need to really close it and make it some sort of oval or circle shape. Because if you leave it out here like a triangle almost, you leave it out there like that, and you like, oh, I got them closed in. Unless you've got that wired, you got somebody wiring that, it's got to be a good wiring job. Those sheep are you're gonna come over here, you're gonna do that. They already know this area is no good. Where did they come from that was good? Back there. So when you come up here, every single sheep is gonna sprint as hard as they can back that direction, and they're gonna run directly into that fence, and it better hold. But like anything, I don't care if it's football, if it's basketball, if it's discus, I don't give a crap. Like momentum can be a killer of catch pens. You give a sheep or a bull or anything momentum to run into a fence that isn't like welded pipe, they can kill it. So the best thing you can do is collapse this and keep collapsing it, and you can imagine 16 sheep in here, and you just bring it in tighter, and bang. You'll bring it in so tight that they'll all be in a circle here, and none of them will have enough momentum to jump or to sprint out and hit the fence hard. They'll all be brushing up against it, pushing, they'll be pushing, but they won't have the momentum to really pop any wires off if you tie it. So that's kind of the quick note on the sheep pen, on the catch pen. And it doesn't need to be complicated, like I said, and it doesn't need to be complicated at all. But it does, you need to understand that sheep aren't stupid. Once you catch them once, they know what's happening. And I've dealt with that a million times. That doesn't mean you can't catch them the same way again. The more time between catches helps a lot, especially if you feed in your catch pen. If you feed in your catch pen, that helps a whole lot. And if you got a month or two between catches, then you feed, and then one day you just close it behind them. And that's great. I often don't get that benefit because when I'm catching sheep, I'm catching them, it seems like every 4 days for a month and a half or something for some reason. For deworming, which is in the other video, or for selling them or whatever. But yeah, that's kind of my quick note on catch pens, and not much history lesson today, you know. I guess we could talk about the Book of Job for a minute, and Book of Job is one of my favorites, and we'll just start with the first few chapters. But if you know anything about betting, anything about gambling, anything about that, it's interesting to read the Book of Job, the first few chapters, the rest of it, especially the first few, as a parlay. And if you don't know what a parlay is, it means where you string together bets. So let's say you had football teams playing, and say the Lions were playing a team, and you bet them to win, and you get a payout. And let's say the Patriots are playing a team, and you bet them to win. Well, you could put those two together, and you could say, hey, if the Lions win and the Patriots win, I win more money, you know, but if one of them loses, I lose all my money. And the first few chapters of Job in the Bible is kind of like that, you know. The devil comes up, God boasts to the devil, to Satan, and he says, hey, what about my guy Job? You know, he's awesome. And the devil goes, you know, well, obviously he's awesome. You've given him everything. He's like one of the richest men in his area. Of course he's going to love you. Of course he's awesome. And God goes, and the devil says, basically, let's make a wager. And the wager is, you let me get after him, and I bet you he crumbles. So that's your wager, that's the bet. And the stakes were set before God, saying he's a man of perfect integrity. And that's the stakes. So the stakes are, we're going to wager on a man losing his integrity, and we're gonna see if you can do it, Satan. And Satan goes through the first time, and it's quick. The first wager's super quick, and all the children die. Everything collapses. Every single servant comes up to him that survives from every part. He goes, "Hey, all your animals are dead. All your riches are gone. Your whole family's dead," basically. And Job tears off his robes, and he tears off his robes and goes into fasting, but he doesn't. He keeps his perfect integrity. So that's just a bet. That'd be a straight bet, and God won. Well, then he does it again. Satan comes up. The angels come back to God, and Satan comes with them, and basically God says the same thing. He goes, "Yeah, look, even after you attacked him, he kept perfect integrity." And well, Satan said, "Yeah, because you didn't allow me. Like, obviously, if I take away all of his riches, but I don't hurt the man directly, he won't go against you. But if you let me get after his flesh, he'll fold. He'll lose his integrity." And God says, "Okay, do whatever you want to him, but you have to spare his life." Satan goes, "Deal." So the wager's placed again, and it's a parlay now. You got two bets that rely on each other. And if Job lost in the first one, God loses. And if Job loses in the second one, God loses again, because it's a continual bet. If Job crumbles at any point, God loses. So now this is the second wager. This is the parlay. And Satan gives Job boils and a few other things, and really hurts him. And Job has some friends come over, but he never loses integrity. And that's the first few chapters of Job, and then it goes into his buddies talking about the situation. But yeah, it's if you ever think of a biblical parlay that God's made, Job's kind of that story. And Job is my favorite book in the Bible. Just that, like, hey, bad times are coming, suck it up. God's got a plan, and if you don't know the end part of Job, I'll let you read that yourself. But God's got a plan, and you're watching this sheep video, so maybe God's plan is for you to get sheep, and that's pretty biblical right there. But with that, I'll let you go, and I appreciate you watching, and I'll catch you on the next video.